Welcome to Loco Gringo, Mexico, the place where we transform a tourist into a traveler, because you deserve to see more of the world than just what's in a guidebook. Each week, we talk with amazing locals who know the Riviera Maya and Yucatan like only a local can, and get them to share their tips and insights on the local scene, culture, and cuisine from a local's perspective. So, pour yourself a margarita, grab a comfy chair, and let's get the show going.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Loco Gringo, Mexico. So glad to have you. My name's Kay Walton, and I have the wonderful privilege of introducing to you to a friend of mine who's been so close to my heart for so many years, and he has been around the world, and he finds the Riviera Maya to be home, and he has a special journey that he's had here, not only as a leader in the yoga community, but he has a special, he's had a special journey here that included his parents. And I asked him if he would share some of that with us today, because I think he's got an unusual take to life here in Mexico and what it can mean to all of us. Hey everybody, I'm so glad you're here today because I'm going to introduce you. Okay, he's my guru and a dear, dear friend of mine. His name is Michael Stewart. He's from Chicago, and he is here in the Akumal area, and I'm really glad he found time to talk to us today about his view on life and times in the Riviera Maya, specifically in the Akumal area. Hey Michael, how are you today?
Hello, Kay. I'm very well. It's beautiful. It's sunny. The waves have been really great, actually. Rare for us, but it's been nice. Nice change in the ocean. So everything is beautiful here, and I'm well, thank you.
Oh, that's great. Hey, Michael, we've been friends for, I don't know, how many years now? Maybe 10?
Yes.
Has it been 10 years? 10 years.
Exactly.
And you have had an amazing journey, and I wanted to see if you would share some of your journey to the area, because originally you're a Chicago boy. Your passion is yoga, and yet you wind up here in the Riviera Maya. And I would like you to share some of how your journey brought you to the sandy shores of Akumal.
Okay. Well, 2005, I'm in the jungle of Laos and having a realization that my parents are starting to age. And getting from Laos or Thailand or Southeast Asia or South Asia back to Chicago at best would take 24 hours, and sometimes back then it could take up to 48 hours. And since I was the only child that my parents had, it was kind of my responsibility to be close enough to them. So I thought, okay, well, I'll go to the Caribbean, because I had lived in Tobago in the late 90s, and I thought I'd get back to the Caribbean, never actually ever considering the Mexican Caribbean. So I Googled it. I went yoga Caribbean, and about 6 or 7 places came up along the Riviera Maya, and that was, first of all, confusing, because I have to admit my ignorance. I did not recognize that the Caribbean Sea went to Mexico. And I saw a bunch of places, and one of them, which is still around today, was offering a place for somebody who was a skilled yoga teacher and also who could manage their spa, which hadn't begun yet. So I contacted them, and then I had some interaction back and forth and recognized that I really wasn't the person who could do that. But we had a really nice communication, and the woman I was communicating with asked me if it would be okay to pass my contact details on to her yoga teacher, who happened to have a little studio here in Akumal. So she did, and then when I came down from the jungle several weeks later, I had an email from Leticia, who had the yoga studio in Akumal, and she said, well, in the summer months, it's quite slow, because we used to have a slow season back then. It's quite slow in the summer, so she would take off and go elsewhere to study and so on, and said that I could come and have the studio. She'd offer me a room, and whatever I could do was up to me. So I showed up here, and I met some lovely people. And in about few weeks after this occurred, we had Emily hurricane come by, because I didn't even realize that there was a hurricane season. And I came at that time, and when Emily hit, uh, we all took a little journey. A bunch of people from here, they kind of put me in their car and said, "You're going with us." And I was like, "Okay." So we went on an adventure, because there were lots of dogs and cats. And back then, there was no place to house them. So we had to go quite far away to find a place, veterinarians that also had a place to safe house the animals. So I got in a car with some people who were super nice and took me along on this journey. And when we returned, Akumal did not look like the same town, because hurricanes can do interesting things to the landscape. And what I discovered after this hurricane was the community and the bonding that occurred in this natural disaster. And it really struck me as something that I was really interested in being part of. People who bond together when things get really difficult. That was my decision to continue returning to Akumal, because I saw people really bonding together in a difficult situation, and that was very inspiring for me. As a traveler, yoga teacher, I've traveled around the world, and to see that occur in this little community, in this beautiful, pristine place, was very, very inspiring. So that was the beginning of my stays here.
Now, I know, because we're friends, that you after 10 years or so now, is that you're not here year round, that you've been traveling in the summer, that you go over to Europe and that, but yet there's something that keeps bringing you back to the area. And I know that you love the beach, but not that it's not the biggest draw in the world. Is it what keeps bringing you back to this area year after year?
I'll tell you, as I said a little while ago, it's certainly this community that exists here. And, some people have been here 30 years. Some people have been here, like myself, now 12 winters. Some people have been here 1 year. There's something very magical about this place that attracts people. And it attracts a certain kind of people that are open-minded, willing to withstand things that we might not be accustomed to growing up in the United States or Canada or Europe, and resilient people, open-minded people, people who can generally go with what living in a place like this can afford you. So that's what really brings me back. Of course, the nature is incredibly beautiful. Some of the most striking beaches, and I've traveled all over the world, some of the most striking beaches, the jungle, the communities that exist in Quintana Roo and Yucatan that are absolutely still connected to their roots, Mayans that are still connected to their roots, traditions that are very, very ancient, that have a lot to teach us. So those are the things that are here. Some of them have existed before tourism came, and they still exist, and some of them came because of the tourism that's here. And both of them seem to blend together really well, particularly in Akumal. I find that very, very, I find it very comforting to come here because of that.
Now, Akumal definitely, as you know, for me and you and a lot of our friends, all consider Akumal home, and it's we're an interesting family, all of us down here. Michael, I want to ask, and you have a unique story to tell that a lot of the people that I've met over the years and people who I've talked to on this podcast don't have, is that you have brought your parents, as you mentioned, is when we first started chatting today, is that you brought your parents from Chicago as they started having health issues, as you brought them to Mexico. And I was wondering if you would share a little bit of that story, because I think you have a very interesting perspective and a firsthand experience on that type of scenario that so many people are now facing as their parents age and as we all age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was one of those gifts that revealed itself in my time here. I'd never considered it, As I said, my parents were going through their process of aging, and I tried to have them in a home in the Chicago area, and that didn't work out at all. And the costs were prohibitive for me. Um, so what I did, with the help of this local community, I decided that I was going to bring them here after doing some research on the hospital care that was here. Very, very good, by the way. Hospital care that was here, and all the possibilities of caring for my parents in their own apartment here, and having people care for them in a very, very loving way here in their home. They could have the food they wanted, they had the community that was around all the time, and medical care that was, in my opinion, before I moved my parents here, which was in 2012, from about 2009 till 12, so 3 years, I had to deal with the medical community back in the States. And my father was retired from the U.S. Corps of Army Engineers, so he had impeccable insurance, so that was never the issue. But the care itself in the United States, or in the Chicago area, I mean, the best hospitals, there's no doubt about that. But the best there and the best here, the big difference is the care for the individual. Here, people are individuals. And what I found in the hospitals here, you could speak with a physician. They would take the time to talk with you. The patient is not a number, is not just a name that they never look at. People would come to the room, would talk to my parents, would talk to me, would take the time. You could actually speak to a physician. And that to me was very, very heartwarming and absolutely necessary. Both my parents, I moved them here. They both left their bodies here. And I'm very thankful that the process of their leaving occurred here, because I could do it in the way that I felt absolutely supported. And I felt that it was the best way for them to go, because I would not have been able to give them the care or the attention or the support back in the United States. So there are many people, and I've mentioned this to you before, many people we know, they've spent years and years down here, and when they start to get to that place where they feel like they need more care, they go back to the States and they're miserable, because first they've left this beautiful environment, and the care up there, unless you have to really be a millionaire several times over to have the kind of care that I was able to afford my parents down here. So, I'm always speaking to people who have this situation with their parents in the United States. I'm like, bring them here, because over the years the care has gotten better, more accessible. Anything you can have in the United States, you can have it here for a fraction of the cost, and far, far better care, interpersonal care, person to person. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Well, let me ask you, was there an issue? I know you're Spanish. It's getting much better.
Yes.
And I'm in no position to criticize.
Yes.
Was language ever an issue when dealing with the doctors
Not
or any
at all.
people offering care?
Not at all. On the level at the hospitals, every physician I encountered spoke English impeccably. So that was never an issue, and most nurses could speak English. Now, when we got to the more personal care at home, that was slightly more of an issue, because I had, people, local women coming and taking care of my parents, cooking for them, and even staying with them as their conditions got worse. So they only spoke Spanish, but it was never an issue. And actually, there was one young woman who stayed with my parents for the whole 3 years they were here. And by the end of it, her English improved vastly and my Spanish improved vastly, because we were really actually trying to communicate about something that was very important. So no, I would have to say language was not an issue.
Well, it's great to hear, and I'm really grateful that you share that experience, because it's a very intimate experience, and insight into your family. But I think it's also a very important experience to relate to the people who listen to the show, not only in their aging or dealing with their parents, but just to have insight into healthcare, and as the medical facilities continually grow, and now there's a lot of medical vacations happening in Cancun. I know there's even now some alternate cancer therapies being offered in the Cancun area that I've heard about, and I think that there's Mexico's provided some very good options for people in the world of medicine.
Yeah, I really, and I just have to emphasize this. What we have to pay for care back in the United States, whether you are insured or not, is sometimes prohibitive. I mean, to get an MRI in the United States, I know this. It's an excess of $700. You can get an MRI down here for about $100.
No, I mean, it's crazy.
I mean, that's just one. That's one little example of the difference in cost, and it's exactly the same. It's an MRI. An MRI is an MRI. So
no, exactly. No, you're so right, and I know that also. I have a great dermatologist in Cancun, and I see her at a fraction of the cost. I pick up the phone, and it's $40, and she's an oncologist who specializes in dermatology, and it would be 3 or 4, probably more like 5 times that amount of money just to get an initial consultation without a procedure done too. So I definitely have had similar experiences where, you could get some great quality care at a fraction of the cost, and it's a much more personal level, and you're not going to be on a waiting list and and wait have to 4 months to try to see somebody.
Yes, exactly. I really, anybody who's listening to the show, if you're in that position, either yourself or your parents, please consider this area, because anything you can get in the States, you can get it here.
That's for sure. Well, Michael, as we talk about, wellness, I know that you're a huge believer that you have found wellness of mental, spiritual, and physicality, that's the word, through yoga. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about the world of yoga and the environment that we live in, because I think that there's a magic to the area that has lent itself to people who practice yoga and other similar practices who have come to the area and have made it home or use it as an area for a wellness type of vacation or retreat, and found it to be a bit deeper than just hanging out on the beach. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I mean, as you know, Kay, my passion it's my life. I've been teaching yoga. This will be the 20th year. In 2017 will be the 20th year of teaching yoga. And as you also know, I created a system of yoga called Shantavira Yoga. And what I found here when I arrived on the coast in 2005 was that there was already at that point a growing trend of people coming down to the coast. Actually, in Puerto Morelos, way even back in the late 80s and early 90s, teachers were coming from North America, Canada, and the United States to bring retreats to Puerto Morelos. That was the first place that was kind of open and had facilities to have groups and retreats and things like that. So it's been growing here for some time. And when I arrived in 2005, it was already burgeoning, and it's grown considerably since then. Almost every resort or all-inclusive, every town on the coast, from Cancun to Chetumal, you can find all kinds of yoga. And I would have to say that either the tourists who come or the people who live here, like we live here now, what we find is there's so many opportunities to be well because the environment is conducive to be well. We have some of the cleanest air I've ever breathed here, because you have it coming off the ocean or the jungle. And both of those are really good ways to breathe clean air. So I think this is one of the reasons that when people get here in a few days, they're like, oh, I already feel really, really well in myself. And then you start to add practices that are profound and old and tried and tested that are in the field of yoga, and you leave here after a week or 10 days or 2 weeks or 3 weeks feeling 100% more than you were when you got here. And I have to say, I would attest it primarily to the quality of the air that we breathe, and just, the sunshine, the slower pace. So all of that is conducive for humans to be well, because
Absolutely.
the human organism is designed to be well. We just have to provide the environment for it to do that in. And you add some practices like yoga. And here I have to say, it's not only yoga, there's all kinds of wellness activities that many places along the coast offer. So, I find it the best place for me to grow Shantavira yoga. The students here, many are locals who've lived here for a long time. Some are like us, transplants. And the people who are transplants need practices like yoga because we're in a new environment. We live differently than we did in the States, and we find here through practices of yoga that we have the support system that really nurtures and nourishes us. So I find it one of the most conducive places to have practices that allow you to really focus on yourself.
Absolutely. And I know, having been in practice with you and practices in the United States, is that more and more in yoga, it's not as restrictive as people might think, especially if they're new to yoga, because, we all have, we may have a bad knee or a bad shoulder or something like that, but yoga's now has, there's more application to make modifications in a yoga practice for people who have, physical issues they need to kind of keep in the back of their mind so they don't injure themselves more.
Well, that's exactly, in everything that every kind of practice or anything that's new, it takes some time to get to the nuances of what that particular practice system has to offer. And now yoga's been in the West in a big way, at least for 45 years. I mean, it's been around since, the late 1890s, to be very specific, in the United States. We can look at a specific moment in 1892, I believe it was, the World Religions Conference that was, interestingly enough, held in Chicago, where a very, very famous yoga teacher, Swami Vivekananda, was invited to be the keynote speaker. And that is really the point where yoga starts to grow in the United States. But since, I would say probably since the late 50s, when it was really showed on TV around 10 or 11 o'clock. I can't remember the name of the person who had the TV show, but this is an interesting phenomenon that occurred. That's why a lot of people, in the United States till about 10 or so years ago, it was a lot of mostly women doing yoga. And it has to really do with this TV show that was on in the 50s, because the moms were home back then. Moms didn't go out to work that much in the 50s and 60s, early 60s. So the moms were home watching, while they were doing their mom business, they were watching this TV show that had yoga on it. So it became associated with what women did. But in the last 10 or 15 years, that whole image has been blown way out of the water. There are athletes who do it. I mean, we know this, there are football players who do yoga, there are basketball players who do yoga, there are young people who do, and there are old people. So the modifications that people can make now is because the nuances of what yoga has to offer are beyond just I'm fit and I can be really bendy and stretchy and I'm strong. No, yoga is for everybody at every time of your life. And thankfully, here on the coast, there are teachers who are very skilled at dealing with all kinds of people. Here in Akumal, we have a little studio, and it's a very, very diverse offering, from very dynamic practices of yoga to therapeutic approaches to yoga. So when people come to our little studio in yoga in Akumal, I have to do that plug because it's a beautiful studio, as you well know.
Yep.
What we offer there, everybody who comes, and I've talked to seasoned practitioners, teachers, trainers of teachers that have come to our studio, and they're ever amazed at the great quality of offering through this tiny little studio. So, whatever your condition is, yoga certainly is going to help you to be the most you can be with what you have. And that's kind of what our focus in yoga and Akumal is. Everybody's in a place in their development, in their aging process, in their degeneration process, in their injury process. And what yoga can give you is the potential to be as full as you can with what you have. So that's what we feel is the best offering and the most complete practice. As you said, if you have overactive mental conditions like lots of work all the time, you can't sleep, yoga is going to help you. You have injuries, knees, shoulders, spine, intestinal issues, yoga can help you. If you have some deep spiritual questions, yoga can help you. So,
It's great.
I've done lots of things before I came to yoga, and it's the most complete system that exists, in my opinion.
And I wanted, I think people don't realize we talk about yoga and people have their concept of what they think it is depending on what their experience or their knowledge of it is from wherever home is for them, US, Canada, Europe. The one thing I have found unique, because I've done practices and go to a studio in the Houston area when I'm in the States, is that we have the advantage, or we have the opportunity in Mexico where we do Kirtan. You do Kirtan and you have an album. Yes. I'm going to do a little plug for your album.
Thank you.
And I wanted to explain to people because, everybody thinks that yoga is on the mat, but there's so much more to yoga. And yes. I just wanted to talk about the music side because we have a lot of fun doing it.
Yes. Well, Kirtan is an interesting phenomenon. It's actually very, very big in the United States. I mean, I have to say it's starting to become big in the center of the United States, certainly on the left coast and the right coast. It's huge.
It's not quite in Texas yet, so.
No, I don't think so, because I have a couple of studios I have conversations with, and they're like, well, we don't do that thing. And it's okay. Yeah. But, like everything, it takes some time. Basically, what Kirtan is a practice. It's a devotional practice. It's kind of like being in church and singing. It's exactly the same thing from a different tradition. Now, what happens is in Kirtan, you chant mantras. Now, mantras are in the language of Sanskrit. Now, here's an interesting thing about Sanskrit. Sanskrit is a language it's a phonic language that each sound, the way it's said, creates a certain vibration that will cause healing, that will cause wellness, openness, quietness, whatever you're looking for. That's why these mantras are in Sanskrit. So what they do is they invoke certain energetic qualities that you have within you. They just kind of wake them up. So it's done with music. Sometimes it's done with traditional instruments that would be indigenous to India, like harmoniums and tabla and mridangam. But what happens in the world is whatever instrumentation people are accustomed to, guitars, horns, synthesizers,
drums,
any instrumentation you can think of, people put these traditional mantras to the kind of music that they've grown up with. And as you've heard on my offerings, I mean, I grew up in Chicago, so there's funk. I learned African music, so there's funk, there's African music, there's all kinds of influences because you just put it in a way that you are accustomed to. And basically how it works is one person says something and the group says it back. And this can go on, as you know, because you've been in them, they can go on, one mantra can go on for 5 minutes or 35 minutes or an hour. It depends on how it feels for everybody in the room. And it's actually the easiest way to get to that place of calm. When you're done chanting a mantra in a group of people and you stop, you have never experienced silence quite like that. That's why I think it's such a growing movement within the yoga practice. And I see it growing more and more because there are, even Tina Turner last year put out a Kirtan album. There's all kinds of musical artists. Sting sings kirtan regularly. So there are lots of Madonna, same story. There are lots of people that have included mantras in their music. Well, we know the earliest, of course, is, the Beatles. They introduced My Sweet Lord. Is basically what he's singing to is Krishna. That's what George Harrison is singing to there. So, this has been going on for some time, and certainly in the world of yoga, it's really a big movement because it's the fastest way to get to that quiet place within you. When you're done and it's quiet, it's more quiet than you've ever experienced. And it's going to keep growing. Oh, yeah, I have to just say this, since your folks are listening. Mantrika, and you can buy it on iTunes.
And we'll have links.
Is the name of the CD.
We'll have links over to the show, and the show notes will have links over to Michael's CD, and it's great music. And I think that, if you're coming down to the Riviera Maya, and you want to discover a little bit more, maybe you don't want to hit the map, but to come into Kirtan, that you'll definitely have a very interesting experience and a very pleasurable one. I really,
yes.
I love it. I love it. I'm one of those people who gets up and dances to it. So, as our listeners are hearing, you can tell that there's passion. Of course, I have passion for yoga, not nearly as what Michael has, and he's just so open to share that. But not to go so far off of the track is that, Michael's had a great opportunity to travel all over the world, but also you've been traveling a lot in Mexico, and I know your home is here in the Riviera Maya, but have you found another spot in Mexico that piques your curiosity, or that you hold dear in your heart?
It's interesting you say that, because as you know, when I'm here, I always take excursions to go explore this beautiful country. It's vast. Till I came down here, I had no inkling or knowledge about what Mexico had to offer. Now, I've been north, south, east, and west in this country. I love the ocean, of course. I've been over to the Pacific coast several times, and I really, really find places on the Pacific coast that are still untouched. And I'm amazed. There's stretches of beach where no humans. Last year I was just south of Puerto Vallarta for about 6 days, and I was on a beach, and I don't think in 6 days I might have seen 3 other people on a vast strip of beach.
Amazing.
Nobody down there. And really beautiful. Of course, what I find really beautiful is the low mountainous regions just not far from Mexico City, because that's a whole, I love the ocean. I've lived more than half my life near some giant body of water, ocean or a sea, but the magic of the mountains in Mexico and the indigenous people that live in those regions, I find very attractive. I try and get to that at least once or twice a season when I'm here, because it's really another world, and the friendliest, most inviting, hospitable people I've encountered. So there's places around San Cristobal de Casas, which I know you know very well, that's really beautiful. Oaxaca is really incredibly beautiful. This whole country is incredible, because I usually travel, just get on a bus and go. Somebody will give me a clue and I just go find for myself. I don't look it up in books, and you don't have to, because it's all available. And if it's tourist bound or not, you will find a place to stay, and you will find really good food, and you'll find really friendly, hospitable people. That's what I've encountered in Mexico everywhere I go. So, I'm definitely a big advocate of people coming down here and exploring for themselves, because, like I said before, in dealing with when we were speaking a little bit about my parents, language is only an issue if it's an issue in your mind.
Oh,
so
that's
people are willing to communicate. This is the important thing. You might not speak Spanish, but they're willing to communicate. This is what language is supposed to be about. So
Absolutely.
communication can happen here. So come and explore.
All right. So tell me, give me, Michael, a couple of your hidden secret spots that people could come and explore when they're down here, because I know that, you don't you stay off kind of the main thoroughfare of tourist attractions. So what are some of those little places that Michael Stewart loves to go to?
Here in the Riviera?
Here in the Riviera Maya.
Okay. Well, I would certainly say, if you, for me, one of the best sites, one of the best ruined sites is not far from where we are in Akumal. It's just south of Tulum. It's a Mayan site that's called Muyil. And the reason Muyil is so special is because it's in the jungle, and it's one of the sites, maybe the only one here in Mexico, Mayan site, that was not a site that people lived in. It was only used for ritual. So it's really magical, and people rarely go there, and it's still used for ritual all the time. In fact, when we concluded the Mayan calendar in 2012, that's where I attended the ritual, and it was really beautiful, right in the jungle, and certainly not one that's, it's not Chichen Itza where there's thousands and there's no vendors there. It's just a beautiful site, pristinely maintained, in the jungle, not far from where we are. So that is one of my faves, certainly. And there's also another little place not far from where we are. It's a beach that is a turtle sanctuary, so there's nothing on it.
Escasel?
It's Ishkasel, exactly. And the cool thing about Ishkasel is you've got this beautiful beach, and you've got a cenote right there, all in the same place. Now that to me is, the cenotes here, of course, are beautiful. Most of them are, known, and this little one, only if you happen to find Ishkasel, and I'm not going to tell you exactly where it is, because if you want to find it, you have to go look.
Okay, we won't give out directions then.
No, we won't give out directions, but it's not far from Akumal. And if you really are adventurous, you'll find the nugget and the cenote that's there too. So those are two of my favorite places, certainly. And what I tell you what, where else is a really beautiful, and I've rediscovered it again because I just did a festival there last 2 weeks ago. It's a town called Puerto Morelos. That's also really beautiful, and it's a nice mix of people who've settled there, some for 30 years, who are North Americans, and the Mexicans who live there. So it's a really, really beautiful mix. So on the coast, those kind of places are the ones I tend to gravitate towards, because I like when people come somewhere and they become part of what's there rather than try and make it what they came from. So, and that this occurs here. This happens here. People are willing to do that, and that's why I continue to return and will do so.
Well, I know that we're all of your friends. We're always happy when you're here, and we always wish you could stay longer, for sure. So, Michael, I want to ask you, how can people reach you, find you? I know we're going to put on our show notes, we'll put a link over to your website for Shantavira Yoga, but how can people reach out to you?
That really is the best way. But if you come to town, just come up to our little studio in Yoga in Akumal, and I'll tell you what, if you come to Akumal and if you really want to find Michael Stewart, it's very easy. You can ask almost anybody in the street, and they will tell you where I am. So you can certainly find me through Shantavira Yoga. And you can, if you're on Facebook, you can go to Shantavira Yoga on Facebook, and that's there as well. But here in Akumal, I'm very easy to find. So
Wonderful.
Please come and have an adventure, because this is a place for adventure. And the adventure is not really an external one so much. The adventure is you with yourself. And this is what I find about Akumal that's such a gem. It's like if people come here and use it as a base, and you can go to all kinds of fantastic things around, but if you really want to really be with you, this is the place to do that. I really have to emphasize that. This is really a place people can come for 5 days or stay for a long time, and when they leave, they will have a better relationship, a deeper relationship, a more profound relationship with themselves than they did before they came. I can guarantee that.
You're so right, Michael. I'll also, just for everybody who's interested, on our show notes for today, we'll have a link over to Yoga and Akumal, to their Facebook page, so you can check out the schedule. There's lots of great instructors. If you can't catch up with Michael in one of his classes, I can highly recommend all the instructors at the studio. They're great. And I hope that we'll all see you on the mat, or you just stop in and say hi to Michael. That'll be great. Michael, you know I love you, man, and I appreciate your time so much today. It's always wonderful when we get a chance to talk.
Okay, thank you so much for having me on your show. And just as a parting word, please come, and come because it is important for people who don't ever come to Mexico to see that it's such a beautiful gem. And what you might think you know about it is not even the tip of the iceberg. So bring your adventurous heart with you. Thank you very much, Kay. Have a lovely day, and I look forward to seeing you very soon, my dear.
Yes, me too. All right. Thank you. Well, a big muchas gracias to Michael, and a big thanks to all of you for joining us today. If you'd like more information on today's show, to get the places that Michael's recommended, please visit our show notes at locogringo.com/podcast. You'll also find links over to Shantavira Yoga and Akumal. We invite you to come and hit the mat with us, and a link over to Michael's CD. Definitely worth checking out. Also, I invite you to go to locogringodirectory.com, where we have listings of a lot of the yoga studios in the Riviera Maya. So if you're not staying in the Akumal area, but you're looking for a yoga studio in Tulum or Playa del Carmen or Puerto Morelos, we've got listings where you can grab a class. Until next week, everybody. Hasta la vista.
Thanks for listening. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe. For links, show notes, and more information, head on over to locogringo.com or give us a call toll-free at 800-478-0081.
Porque se tragó la luna, estaba enferma la rana, su madre soba que soba, dedos de pluma la panza, pensó ranita que luna era una toronja blanca, y aunque la luna es de leche, la leche estaba cortada. Croa, croa, dedos de pluma, croa, croa, dedos de agua.